Hello and welcome back to our training in classroom observations for principals. So this is a group of school principals from elementary, middle, and high school. Uh, Welcome. So all of you have a wide variety of experience and anything from the number of years that you have been the leader of a school to the areas where you have been. Some of you have been at all three levels, elementary, middle, and high, and some of you have been at one or two. Um, it doesn't matter. One thing that makes you unique is that you are the instructional leader of the school. And one thing that you share in common is student learning and student success. And you share in common also teacher learning and teacher success. So, in order to make those two possible, you are here because you also have to experience principal learning and principal success. And we're going to talk about one of those three areas today, which is teacher learning, teacher success. So, how do we do that? So, we know that over the last 20 years in education, particularly after Not Child Left Behind, there was a renewed push to understand exactly what is going on in our classrooms, exactly what is going on with our students. Um, who are our students? What do they bring with them? What are the challenges that accompany them to schools? So, throughout your careers, you have experienced a number of different initiatives, different areas that departments of education or maybe your own local school system has concentrated on or focused on. And more than likely, you have seen that those initiatives come and go. So we're going to talk today, especially you are going to talk today in small groups about where do we begin? Where do we begin to make change sustainable that can survive the changes in you going to a different school, for example. And so whatever you do has to be part of the culture of the school. How do we set in motion for our teachers those initiatives and practices that can become part of their daily practices and routines? And so we're going to discuss that in length today. And by the end of our session, you should have a better understanding, more collective understanding of where do I begin? What a powerful question. Where do I begin? So we know that successful systems and organizations communicate very well. They evaluate, is it working? We know that successful teams communicate, and they communicate a lot. Uh, but we also know that there is a structure about what they do. And that structure we have seen present in some schools and not so present in others. So when we talk about where do I begin, one thing we need to keep in mind is this type of analysis of what is going on in our schools in order to improve student learning and student achievement via the training that we do for our teachers, that we want to be long-term sustainable. There's no such thing as just one-time treatment. We want to make sure that our teachers understand first and foremost that this is not a criticism of how hard they work. This is not a criticism of, nobody's spying on how early they arrive or how late they stay at work. We're going to talk about, where do I begin by understanding what are we doing in the classroom. We're also going to talk about, a question that is very interesting. It comes from instructional rounds, which is tasks predicts results. And so in understanding where do we begin, we have to understand a few things. We have to understand that tasks do mean a lot as far as the impact that they have on student learning, on teacher success. So We also need to understand the impact of planning. We need to understand the science per se behind what is happening in our classrooms. So we know that success does not happen by chance. So you're going to have to, in your positions as school principals, you're going to have to engineer that type of success. And so not just so much that you are an island of success out there because things will work, based on our training, but making change and success sustainable for your students, making the changes that you're about to discuss and hear about sustainable, that can be incorporated into the culture of the school, which can survive your transition as a principal, right? Eventually you will go on to another school. Some of you may go on to a central office, etc. So what are those areas that we have to focus on? And what are those areas that our teachers are really, open to the notion of, okay, let me examine what I'm doing. And that is not seen as just one more thing I have to do. So during today's conversation, you're going to talk about planning. What is your understanding of planning? How do you review lesson plans in your school? How do you set in motion PLCs in your school? Do you have a structure? Do you have agendas? Do you have objectives? Where is the data component in planning? So that can be very intimidating for teachers that are not familiar with a more structured form of lesson planning. We have to start at the beginning when we talk about lesson planning, right? And we're going to drive that question often about everything that we do. Where do I begin? So you have this machine called your school, with a million moving parts. So it makes it a complex system. So by definition, complex systems, your school is a complex system. Complex systems succeed or fail in very complex ways, right? There's not just one thing that is not functioning. There's a whole bunch of things that make things, possible and operate as a successful school, or there's a whole bunch of things that are just not happening. So where do I begin will be our guiding question. So let's begin with questions about planning. What is our understanding of planning? What are some essential components of a lesson plan? You're going to discuss that in a few minutes as a group. But I wanted to take the first 10 minutes to introduce the topic that can be, very simple for some, right? Oh, planning. Well, I already know how to do lesson plans. Lesson plans is one thing, delivering instruction is another, but preparing a lesson plan, if we have 40 of you in this group, there will be 40 different understandings of what is a lesson plan and what are some of the essential components of planning. So there again, throw in the question, where do I begin? So you're going to divide into groups and you're going to discuss your own understanding of planning. And some of you have a more academic background, some of you have a more managerial background, some of you have a good combination of both. But again, all of you are in a position of being the instructional leader of school. All of you are the principal of your school. And it doesn't matter if you're in an elementary school or a middle school or a high school, all of you are responsible for the learning that is happening in your buildings. So we're going to talk about planning. Eventually, we will talk about what are some of those essential components of planning that you're going to be discussing, specifically focusing on feedback, specifically focusing on instructional technology, specifically focusing on co-teaching, specifically focusing on task analysis. What are our students actually doing, knowing that tasks predicts results? And again, remember that comes from instructional rounds. And then how do we make it possible for our teachers to really see that we're not here, that you're not there in their classroom to get them, right? So we're going to talk about manageable pieces of information that you can provide in just very brief visits. But we're going to talk about planning before we do anything else. So where do I begin? Let's go ahead and break into groups, and groups of 4, as we have done in the past. Number yourselves 1 through 4. And then let's take turns, 30 seconds each. In the next 2 minutes, the entire group can participate and share their opinion. So if you're number 1, numbers 2, 3, and 4 will just listen for 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and begin. Thank you.